Arnold Friend is every girl's nightmare disguised as the kind of attention she has been taught to want. And that is what makes him so terrifying. He doesn't arrive looking like a monster. He arrives with music, flirtation, confidence, a cool car, a smile, familiar language, and the promise of being seen. He talks like someone from Connie's world, and he looks almost like someone who belongs in the fantasy she's been practicing in front of mirrors and in public spaces where she knows she's being watched. But underneath all of it is something much colder: control. Arnold Friend doesn't just want Connie to notice him. He behaves as if he already has a right to her. Before he ever touches her, before he ever enters the house, before the story tells us exactly what he is, he acts as if Connie's body, attention, fear, and future already belong to him. And to me, that's the real horror of Joyce Carol Oates' story, Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? Connie is trapped because Arnold understands the script she's been given better than she does. He knows how to sound like attention before he becomes a threat, how to mimic desire before he really reveals coercion, and how to turn the fantasy of being chosen into the terror of being claimed. Hi guys, thank you so much for joining me here today. My name is Dr. Whitney Costers, and I've been teaching literature at the college level for over 20 years at this point. And I would love for you to subscribe and join me here on YouTube and TikTok so that we can debate literature, learn writing, and explore research and rhetoric. Today, I'm going to focus specifically on Arnold Friend, who he is, why he's so disturbing, and why readers continue to argue about what he represents. Now, I do have a full lecture on this story in which I discuss it much more broadly, including Connie, popular culture, family dynamics, and the structure of the plot. So if you want the complete analysis of the story, I will link that lecture down below. But here, I want to stay with Arnold Friend because understanding him helps us understand why this story still feels so frightening. And it's also part of a series that I'm beginning where we examine some of literature's most disturbing villains. And there is no better villain to start out with than Friend himself. So one of the first things to recognize about Arnold is that he feels both ordinary and not ordinary. On one level, he feels like a real predator. He shows up when Connie is alone, he knows information he shouldn't, he watches her, pressures her, and refuses to leave. He uses charm, repetition, intimidation, and threat, and keeps shifting the situation until Connie no longer feels that the house can protect her. You should know that Oates was partly inspired by the real-life case of Charles Schmid, but Arnold is not simply a fictionalized criminal. He becomes something larger and stranger than that. So many of my students and readers here on YouTube tell me that Arnold is the scariest villain that they've ever read, but they can't quite put their finger on why. I think it's because Arnold feels strangely unreal. His name sounds fake, right? Arnold Friend. If you listen closely, Friend sounds like fiend, and his friendliness is clearly part of the danger. And if you remove the R's from his name, he becomes an old fiend. His appearance is also unstable. He tries to appear young, but there are details that simply don't fit. His face seems mask-like. His boots appear stuffed as if he's trying to look taller, and his makeup, sunglasses, hair, gestures, and speech are all very performed. It's clear he's playing the role of a boy. In other words, Arnold performs youth back to Connie in a corrupted form. Now, Connie lives in a world saturated with music, boys, cars, beauty, flirtation, and the idea that being looked at means having power. She's 15, and she's beginning to understand herself through desirability. Oates is very clear that Connie has a public self and a private self. At home, she's annoyed, restless, and resentful, but away from home, she becomes someone else. She knows how to look, how to move, and how to attract attention. But the story isn't simply condemning her for vanity. That would be too simple and shallow of a reading. Connie's vanity matters, of course, but the story is doing something much more disturbing than punishing a girl for wanting to be seen. It is showing us a culture that teaches girls to understand their value through desirability, then exposing how dangerous that training can be when the wrong person knows how to weaponize it. So Arnold understands the world Connie has been absorbing, and because he understands it, he can use it against her. So he's particularly frightening and evil, not because he's strange, but because he's familiar. He feels like something that came out of the radio and stepped into the driveway. That matters because music in this story is not just background. It helps create the emotional world Connie lives in by giving shape to romance, longing, fantasy, and identity. And Arnold arrives as if he belongs to that world. But then that world turns predatory. At first, he seems playful. He calls her sweetheart and acts as if they already know each other. Did you notice that he talks as if the situation has already been decided? He tells her that she's going to go for a ride, and he never truly asks because his power comes from acting as if Connie's consent is irrelevant. So his strategy isn't open violence, it's creating inevitability. He says he knows her and where her family is and what they're doing. Then he says he knows who she is and what will happen next. Every statement narrows the space around her because every detail he knows makes the world feel smaller. The house, which should feel like safety, starts to feel fragile. The driveway becomes a trap, and the doorway becomes a boundary. And this is why the scene is so terrifying. Arnold doesn't simply threaten Connie's body. He invades her sense of reality by making her feel known in a way that's not only intimate, but especially violating. Keep in mind now that there is a huge difference between being seen and being watched. Connie wants to be seen, but Arnold watches her. The knowledge he has of her and her world is terrifying because it turns recognition into possession. This is also why readers have argued for decades about whether Arnold Friend is a real man, a devil figure, a symbolic predator, or some kind of nightmare version of Connie's own fantasies and fears. I would love to know your thoughts on him, so be sure to share below in the comment section. If Arnold is read realistically, then he's a predator who uses charm and threat to isolate a young girl. Now that reading is already pretty horrifying, but if he's read symbolically, he becomes something larger, a figure of male violence, sexual danger, corrupted popular culture, and the terrifying moment when fantasy becomes coercion. Arnold can also be read as devilish. His strange appearance, unnatural knowledge, almost hypnotic speech, and ability to seem both ridiculous and terrifying make him feel like a tempter. He arrives at the edge of the house like someone who can't simply seize Connie at first. He must draw her outward. Now you'll recall that in biblical temptation scenes, the devil doesn't merely attack. He persuades, distorts, offers, tests, and tries to make the wrong choice seem like the person's own decision. Arnold works in a similar fashion. He pressures, flatters, persuades, and threatens, all while trying to make Connie cross the threshold herself. But what makes him so powerful as a literary figure is that he doesn't have to be only one thing. He can be a real predator and a symbolic force at the same time. That's often how great literary villains work. They're frightening because they're believable as people, but they also gather larger cultural meanings around them. Arnold is not just a man in a gold car. He's a nightmare made out of familiar materials: music, desire, youth culture, male entitlement, and the fantasy of romantic attention. And I think that's where the story becomes especially important to think about carefully because Connie is often misread. Some readers want to blame her. They focus on her vanity, her flirtation, her interest in boys, her desire to seem older, her distance from her family, and then they treat Arnold as if he's the consequence of her behavior. So I take major issue with that reading because not only is it limited, it is very dangerous. Yes, Connie is vain and immature, and sure, she likes attention, but none of that makes her responsible for Arnold Friend. Oates is not saying this is what girls get for being vain. She is showing how a culture trains a girl to seek recognition through desirability and then fails to protect her from the people who know how to exploit that training. So that is a much more serious and disturbing argument, and it's one we still grapple with today outside of fiction. The details may have changed, but the pattern hasn't disappeared. Young women are still taught to be desirable, visible, attractive, interesting, responsive, and available to being watched. They're also often blamed when that visibility attracts danger. They're told to be appealing but not too appealing, confident but not reckless, sexual but not responsible for what others project onto them, careful but not paranoid, friendly but not inviting, polite but not weak. That contradiction is absolutely impossible. So this is where the title becomes haunting. Where are you going? Where have you been? Those questions sound like ordinary ones at first, like the kinds of questions a parent would ask their teenager. But in the context of the story, they become much darker. They are questions about direction, identity, danger, and the forces that have shaped Connie before Arnold ever arrives. Where has Connie been? She's been in the culture of music, mirrors, flirtation, consumer fantasy, and adolescent performance. Where is she going? That becomes the terrifying question Arnold seems to answer for her. The tragedy is not that Connie doesn't fully understand the danger until it's already at her door. And I want to be very clear, that doesn't make her foolish in a simple way. It makes her young and socially conditioned. It makes her vulnerable in a world that has taught her certain scripts without teaching her how dangerous those scripts can become. This is why Arnold Friend's performance is so important. He doesn't appear as pure evil. Pure evil would be easier to recognize and perhaps a little less unsettling. Instead, he appears as a distorted version of something that Connie already knows. He is the fantasy turned inside out. The music becomes a trap, the smile becomes a threat, the attention becomes surveillance, and the promise of escape becomes captivity. By the time she fully understands that she's in danger, Arnold has already taken control of the emotional space. Keep in mind that danger often doesn't begin with someone acting openly dangerous. It begins with discomfort that the person being targeted is taught to second guess. It begins with a joke that feels off or a compliment that feels too familiar. A stranger who knows too much, a refusal to accept no, or a confidence that seems charming until it becomes entitlement. Arnold Friend is terrifying because he shows how thin the line can be between being desired and being hunted. He is a nightmare version of male attention. He's popular culture curdled into threat. He's the stranger who knows too much. He's the fantasy of being seen turned into horror of being claimed. And that's why he remains one of the most disturbing figures in American literature and the first in my series on literary villains. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next villain. And as a reminder, if you want the full analysis of this story, watch my full lecture, which is linked below. And finally, please share below what you think makes Arnold so disturbing. Thanks for joining me here today, and I will see you guys in the next one. Be well.